The morning it happened, Vera Solano was running on 4 hours of sleep and a travel mug of gas station coffee that had gone cold somewhere over Manitoba. She had driven through the night from Winnipeg, 7 hours straight down the Trans-Canada, with the heat cranked and the radio low, her daughter Bea asleep in the back seat under a Rough Riders blanket that had seen better decades. They were supposed to arrive before the lunch rush. They hadn't. By the time Vera pulled into the underground parking of the Harlow Grand, Calgary's newest hotel, and the kind of place that put eucalyptus sprigs in the elevator, it was 12:47 in the afternoon. Bea woke up with a crease across her cheek and immediately asked if there was a pool. There was a pool. There was also a rooftop terrace, a spa that charged $90 for a 40-minute massage, and a lobby that smelled like cedar and money. Vera had been to the Harlow Grand before, but never through the front door. She grabbed the duffel bag from the trunk, took Bea's hand, and walked toward the glass entrance. Her jacket was the old waterproof one she wore on job sites. Her boots were steel-toed. She hadn't thought to change because she hadn't thought anyone would care. She was wrong about that. Across the city, in a corner office on the 22nd floor of a building that did not have eucalyptus in the elevator, Miles Quinlan was on his third call of the morning and already in a bad mood. He had a gift for bad moods. His assistant, Sandra, had once described his resting demeanor as a man waiting to be disappointed, which Miles thought was unfair and which Sandra thought was exactly the point. Miles was 41, the regional director of Quinlan Hospitality Group, his grandfather's company, technically, though his grandfather had been dead for 11 years, and the board had spent most of those years pretending otherwise. Under Miles, the company had expanded from 4 Alberta properties to 12. Under Miles, the Harlow Grand had been built from the ground up. Under Miles, every staff protocol had been reviewed, revised, and laminated into binders that sat unread in the back rooms of every concierge desk. He was proud of those binders. He was also, at this particular moment, trying to get off the phone with the catering manager who had over-ordered smoked salmon for a conference in Banff, and it wasn't going well. "Just redistribute it," Miles said. "Send it to the kitchen at Harlow. They'll find a use." The catering manager said something about portion tracking. "I don't care about portion tracking on surplus salmon," Miles said. "I care about waste sorted out." He hung up. Sandra appeared in the doorway with a look that meant there was something else. "The Harlow called," she said. "There's a situation." Miles reached for his jacket. He had learned over the years that a situation at a hotel could mean anything from a burst pipe to a guest threatening to review them on TripAdvisor. He had also learned that the only way to know which kind it was required going there himself. He took the stairs. Vera had not expected the lobby to feel like a judgment. She had been in nicer buildings. She had designed nicer buildings, or pieces of them anyway. She'd spent the last 6 years as a structural consultant for a mid-size firm in Winnipeg, the kind of firm that got brought in when the architects were done dreaming and someone needed to make sure the dreams didn't fall over. She understood load-bearing walls. She understood how many columns a building this size needed at its base, and she could tell, just from the way the light fell across the atrium ceiling, that whoever had engineered this place had done beautiful work. She noticed all of that in the first 10 seconds. In the next 10 seconds, she noticed the woman at the front desk noticing her. The woman's name tag said Claire. She had the kind of posture that came from years of training guests to feel they were being evaluated, and she was currently deploying it on Vera with considerable precision. "Welcome to the Harlow Grand," Claire said. It came out flat, like a door opening partway. "Hi," Vera said. "We have a reservation, Solano." Claire typed something. The pause was 1 second longer than it needed to be. "I see it. You're in room 418, great." Vera set the duffel on the floor and looked toward the elevators. "Is there a pool on site? My daughter wants to know." "The pool is available to guests on the 3rd floor," Claire said. "Check-in isn't until 3. It's almost 1. Our rooms are prepared on a rotating basis. I can't guarantee availability before 3. Vera nodded. She had dealt with this before. "Is there somewhere we can leave our bags while we wait?" "Luggage storage is available through the concierge." Claire's gaze moved briefly to Bea, then back to Vera's jacket. "The concierge desk is near the side entrance, just through the corridor there." She pointed toward a hallway that did not lead to the main lobby. Bea looked up at her mother. "Are we going the back way, Mom?" "Apparently," Vera said. She picked up the duffel. She didn't say anything else to Claire. She'd learned a long time ago that some battles weren't worth the energy when you were operating on 4 hours of sleep and cold gas station coffee. She followed the hallway. What she didn't know, walking away, was that a man in a gray coat had just come through the main entrance and stopped at the front desk. Miles had heard the exchange from 15 feet away. He had been walking toward the front desk when it happened, and something in the way the front desk attendant's voice had flattened out. That particular corporate polished blankness that staff sometimes confused with professionalism had made him slow his pace and listen. He had heard the concierge desk is near the side entrance. He had seen the woman with the duffel bag and the little girl in the green. He had done the math. He didn't go after them immediately. He went to the desk first. "Claire," he said. She looked up, didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't in his usual suit, had come straight from a site visit in Airdrie and was wearing the wool coat he kept in his car for exactly these situations. Then her eyes landed on the lanyard clipped to his breast pocket, the one with the Quinlan Hospitality logo, and her posture changed. "Mr. Quinlan, that woman you just redirected to the side corridor," he said. "Was there a reason for that?" Claire's expression did something complicated. She was asking about the concierge. "Concierge services are available from the main desk," Miles said. "It says so on the website. It says so on the laminated card in the elevator." "Where does it say guests should use the side corridor?" She didn't answer. "Where's the general manager?" "Mr. Drexler is in a meeting. Tell him it ended early." Miles walked toward the corridor. He found Vera at the luggage counter signing a claim ticket. Bia was sitting on top of the duffel bag, studying the pattern on the marble floor with the focused attention of a child who had decided the adults were being boring. "Mrs. Solano," Miles said. Vera turned. She had the look of someone who had been expecting to be left alone and was mildly annoyed to have been wrong. "Yes, my name is Miles Quinlan. I own this hotel." He paused. "I owe you an apology." She studied him for a moment. There was something careful in the way she looked at people. Not suspicious exactly, but assessing. He recognized it because he did the same thing. "The front desk sent us back here," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a statement of what had happened, delivered without drama. "I know," Miles said. "That shouldn't have happened. It won't happen again." "Okay." Vera picked up the claim ticket and folded it into her jacket pocket. "Is that all?" He blinked. Most guests, when they received a personal apology from the owner of a hotel, said something, thanked him, or took the opportunity to list every other grievance they'd ever had with a hotel in their lives. This woman was looking at him, the way you looked at someone who had told you a fact you already knew. "I'd like to personally check you in," he said, "and upgrade your room if you'll allow it." Bea looked up from the floor. "Does the upgrade come with a pool view?" Miles looked at the child. "It does, actually," Mom said, with a great seriousness. "Say yes." Vera looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she looked at Miles again, and something in her expression eased, not warmth exactly, not yet, but the particular absence of wariness that came before it. "All right," she said. "Lead the way." They walked back through the main lobby together. Miles noticed the moment Claire saw them. He watched her face cycle through recognition, confusion, and something that looked uncomfortably close to dread. He didn't say anything as they passed. He didn't need to. The elevator opened. The three of them stepped in. Bea looked at the eucalyptus sprig in the brushed bronze holder on the wall. "That's a funny thing to put in an elevator," she said. "I've always thought so too," Miles agreed. Vera laughed. It surprised her. He could tell by the way she pressed her lips together immediately afterward like she hadn't meant to. But it had been a real laugh, unguarded. He upgraded them to the corner suite on the 7th floor. It had floor-to-ceiling windows facing west, a kitchen counter with a coffee maker that did not require gas station contributions, and a pool view that made Bea press her palms flat against the glass and say, with complete sincerity, "We are never leaving." Miles spent 20 minutes in the suite going over the hotel's available services, more time than he would have spent with most guests, and he wasn't entirely sure why. Vera asked good questions. Not the usual questions about spa packages or restaurant reservations, but things like whether the curtain tracks were magnetic or roller-based, and how many load-bearing walls had been moved in the renovation. She was looking at the building the way he imagined she looked at most things, with professional interest, noticing the seams. "You work in construction?" he asked. "Structural consulting," she said. "I was brought in on a project in Calgary last month. We're here for the follow-up visit." "What project?" She told him the address. He knew it. Everyone in the Calgary development community knew it. A mixed-use tower on Stephen Avenue that had been stalled for 2 years over foundation concerns before a consultant from Winnipeg had apparently resolved what 3 local firms hadn't been able to. He looked at her differently after that. Not that she noticed or particularly cared. The call from Sandra came at 3:15, just as Miles was walking back through the lobby. "The Drexler situation," Sandra said. "He wants to know if you're formally reprimanding Claire." Miles considered it, put together the training records for the front desk team. "All of them. I want to see where the gap is. So that's a yes." This about Claire," Miles said. "It's about what we've been teaching people to see when a guest walks in the door." There was a pause. Sandra had worked for him for 6 years and had learned the difference between his management voice and the one he used when something had actually gotten to him. "Anything else?" she asked. "Not today," he said. He put the phone in his pocket and stood for a moment in the center of the lobby, looking at the front desk. Claire was still there, helping another guest now, her posture impeccable. He thought about the way Bia had climbed up on that duffel bag and studied the marble floor. Patient, unbothered, waiting for the adults to sort themselves out, he walked out to his car. 3 days later, Vera's site visit concluded. She had spent the intervening time doing what she usually did in a new city, working, mostly. She took Bia to the Calgary Zoo on Wednesday afternoon, where Bia stood in front of the snow leopard enclosure for 22 minutes, without moving, which was either a sign of great wonder or an early indicator of a future career in structural observation. Vera chose to interpret it as both. She had not expected to run into Miles Quinlan again. She had particularly not expected it to happen in the hotel restaurant on Thursday morning, where she was sitting with her laptop and a plate of eggs she'd been ignoring for 40 minutes because the project drawings were more interesting than the eggs. He sat down across from her without being invited. She looked up. "That's a bold move," she said. "I come here most mornings," he said. "This is my usual table." She looked around the restaurant. There were at least 6 other empty tables. "There are 6 other empty tables," she said. "I know." He picked up a menu. "How's the project?" She considered asking him to leave. She decided not to. "Good. Complicated. The kind of complicated that turns into good after another 2 weeks of paperwork. Cough. Foundation issue?" The original engineer underestimated the lateral load from the wind corridor between the 2 adjacent towers, she said. "It happens more than you'd think. The math looks right until you model the actual airflow." Miles set the menu down. "Walk me through it." She looked at him. "You want me to explain lateral load calculations over breakfast? I built 12 hotels," he said. "I understand more about engineering than most people assume." She took a sip of her coffee. Then she turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. They talked for an hour and a half. The eggs went completely cold. Bia came down from the suite at some point, still in her pajamas, located her mother by some internal homing signal, climbed into the booth beside Vera, and helped herself to the abandoned toast without asking. Miles looked at the child eating his guest's cold toast and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, something uncomplicated and domestic and good. "She doesn't talk much in the mornings," Vera said. "That's okay," Miles said. "Neither do I." Bea looked up at him with toast crumbs on her chin. "Are you the guy who owns the pool?" "I am good pool," she said and went back to the toast. On the morning Vera was supposed to check out, she came downstairs with the duffel bag and found Miles at the front desk, not behind it, at it, standing beside a man she hadn't met yet. Early 50s, salt and pepper hair, the careful bearing of someone who had spent decades managing other people's comfort, who turned out to be Gerald Drexler, the general manager. Claire was also there. Vera would say later to her sister on the phone somewhere outside Red Deer that she hadn't meant for any of it to happen the way it did. She hadn't come downstairs looking for a resolution. She had come down to return the room keys and collect Bea's pool towel from the luggage room. But Miles had looked up when she walked in and he had said clearly for everyone at the desk to hear, "Miss Solano, there's something I want to do before you leave." He turned to Claire. "This is Vera Solano," he said. "She's a structural engineer who has resolved a foundation problem on Stephen Avenue that 3 other firms couldn't crack. She drove through the night from Winnipeg to be here for her client. She checked into this hotel on Monday with a valid reservation." He paused. When she walked in, she was sent to the side corridor. Claire's face was very still. "I want to make sure," Miles said, "that we all understand what that meant." What we communicated to someone like that when she walked in the door. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't performing for the lobby. There were a handful of other guests within earshot, and some of them had gone quiet, but that wasn't the point. The point was the thing he said next, which he said directly to Claire, with no particular cruelty. She looked like someone who'd driven 7 hours and hadn't changed out of her work clothes, which is exactly what she was. That should have been the end of the assessment. Drexler said something quietly. Claire nodded just once. Then Miles looked at Vera. "Safe drive back to Winnipeg," he said. "And I hope the paperwork's less than 2 weeks." Vera picked up the duffel bag. She looked at him for a moment, that careful, assessing look he had come to recognize. "It'll take exactly 2 weeks," she said. "It always does." She started toward the exit. Bea was already at the door, holding her pool towel, watching her mother walk across the marble floor of the lobby she'd first entered through the side. "Mom," Bea said, "you didn't say goodbye to the pool guy." Vera stopped. She turned around. Miles was still standing at the desk, watching them go. When she looked back, he raised one hand. Not a wave exactly, something quieter than that. She nodded. Then she pushed open the front door. The main one, the one that faced the street, and walked out into the Calgary morning with her daughter beside her and the sun coming at them from the east, the way it always did at that hour. Low and direct and not particularly concerned with who you were or what you were wearing when it found you. The review Vera left for the Harlow Grand 3 days later, on a Tuesday evening after Bea was in bed and the site report was finally done, was 5 stars. The text read, "Clean rooms, good coffee, and a pool my daughter refuses to stop talking about. The owner takes the work seriously, you can tell." She almost didn't add the last part, she added it. Miles read it on a Wednesday morning at his usual table in the restaurant, on his 3rd coffee, with Sandra's daily briefing sitting unread beside him. He read it twice. Then he put his phone face down on the table and looked out the window at the street. There was something his grandfather used to say, back when the company was still small enough to fit in a single building on the edge of Edmonton. Something about how the hardest part of the hospitality business wasn't the logistics or the staffing or the margins. It was learning to see people the way they actually were instead of the way your assumptions arranged them. Miles had printed that out once early in his career and stuck it to the wall above his desk. At some point it had come down, replaced by performance reports and site plans and the quiet insistence of everything urgent. He thought about Bea on top of the duffel bag, studying the marble floor. He thought about Vera turning the laptop to show him the drawings. He thought about the side corridor and the particular kind of confidence it took to walk down it without making a scene. Not because you didn't notice the slight, but because you were too certain of yourself to need to address it. He called Sandra. "The training materials for the front desk," he said. "I want them redone, all of them. Start from scratch, that's a significant project," Sandra said. "I know," he said. "Find someone good." He hung up. He picked up his coffee. Outside, the morning traffic was doing what morning traffic did, and the city was arranging itself the way it always did at that hour, indifferent and enormous and full of people who had driven a long way to be somewhere, and were hoping, without necessarily saying so, that when they walked in the door, someone would see them right.